Hey, everybody. Welcome to season 2 of the Career Talks podcast. I'm your host, as always, Orlando Haynes. And this season, we are kicking things off with our sponsorship, Agape Career Counseling Group, where their focus is helping you discover a career you love. This company is led by Ms. Deborah Russell. She is a certified executive resume writer and a Yahoo News contributor, two-time author and speaker. So please go ahead and check them out at agapeccg.com. Again, that's agapeccg.com. Agape Career Counseling Group. Appreciate the partnership. Now let's get to the episode. Welcome, everybody, to season 2 of the Career Talks podcast. I'm so excited that now we have ventured into season 2. Consistency absolutely helps and works when you got a major support team out there helping you push and go forward. So super excited to kick things off with our amazing guest for tonight. If you don't know who she is,
Orlando, I think there was some type of, there was a cutout. The volume was a little static. I can't hear you. All right, folks, just 1 second. Technical difficulty, but we will be.
all right, let's try it now.
Awesome.
Here we go, folks. Technical difficulties when you go live, but that's the fun part. We're going to push through. Again, for folks who, hopefully you heard the intro with Miss Chelsea C. Williams here. She is the president and founder of College Code, also international speaker, etc. Tia, thank you for letting me know. Let me know if you can hear me now. You can hear me okay, right, Chelsea? All right, great. So we're going to kick things off. Please, Chelsea, share with folks more about you and your expertise.
Will do. Orlando, first, thank you so much for the warm introduction and just for the opportunity to partner. I've been observing your work from afar, and I've had some great friends on your show. So I'm delighted to be in your community tonight. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. As Orlando mentioned, I am the founder and CEO of College Code. We are a workforce and talent development firm that basically is focused on helping organizations engage, retain, and develop talent with the lens towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. So our partners span education institutions, nonprofits, and corporations. And we're just really excited. We say at College Code, we are reimagining work and career. I just really quickly got into this work. I started my business 3 years ago, right out of Wall Street. I went to Spelman College, studied economics. When you go to a liberal arts college and you study economics, there's 2 pathways. Either you become an economist or you go and work on Wall Street, typically. I chose the Wall Street pathway and did an internship in HR as a sophomore. Loved it. I was one of the few people who actually wanted to work in the HR field. We do exist. And, really started my career there and have been passionate about the intersection of people and work. And so, that's a little bit about my backstory. Originally from Raleigh, North Carolina,
Okay.
that's where my folks live. And now I just relocated from New York City to Atlanta in the spring.
Love it, love it, love it. I'm originally from New York with
Yes.
family in Atlanta, so I love that transition. But before we dive into the topic, and this is a timely topic of what's going on here, so I love that we're going to have this discussion. Share how was that transition from Wall Street? What role did you have while you were in
Yeah.
Wall Street? Wall Street.
I was in a rotational program when I first started in early career. This is important. I was in a rotational program. I'm a huge believer in that because it gives you access in your early years to different functions, to different specialty areas. And so I did that. And then I became an HR business partner, which basically, as you can imagine, we do a little bit of everything, interfacing the business and leadership team. And I did that at Barclays Capital. And then I went to Lazard Asset Management, working really closely with the late Vernon Jordan on some diversity, equity, and inclusion
Wow,
initiatives across the firm. Yeah, so that's a little bit of my background. Always the people space and how we really think about pipeline from college into career and then getting uh, young people into their first manager and leadership roles.
I love it because as you tell your story and folks learn more about you, that just lends an absolute amount of credibility as to what you're teaching now with your organization and what you're putting forth. But also just to note that you're not just HR, you're an executive HR, you're a VP of
Yeah,
HR.
yeah,
So those folks know that you've ascended to that level.
yeah.
So where was that transition for you, where you said, you know what, it's time for me to now transition into just a brief description of you going to entrepreneurship and wanting to now give back to the college folks?
Yeah, it's interesting. The entrepreneur journey for me was one I didn't have much exposure to. It was definitely something that I heard about during my time at Spelman. Lightly, it was discussed. You don't have to go the direct pathway. You can take this non-traditional path and be a part of like the startup society. So it was always something in the back of my head, but didn't have anyone in my family per se at the time who was really leading in that space. And so really it came down to seeing a need in the market and then saying, you know what, I think that there's an opportunity to be a part of, changing the landscape and redefining culturally competent and inclusive workforce development and talent development. So I had started writing the business plan for what is now College Code on a campus recruiting trip. So when I was at Lazard, I was helping to lead our campus recruiting initiatives across the investment and marketing divisions. Loved it. Great experience, great organization. But when you're in the weeds and you're getting close to the next generation, you hear things, you see things, you observe things, and I noticed quite a bit of challenges from the student experience, especially when you put the lens of gender and race
Mm,
on people. And even if they're, and here's the thing, even if they're at an Ivy League, even if they're at some the HBCUs that everyone goes and recruits at, even at those institutions you still have students who are saying, I'm not necessarily sure which pathway to take. I'm not necessarily sure that this is the right firm for me. How do I assess if this is the place that is for me to start my career? And so College Code was really birthed out of the opportunity to add the DE&I lens to the development of the next generation, starting from the skill and career exploration stages, all the way through once they get into an organization. How do we make sure that there's a clear and consistent pathway of promotion and advancement? Because if we can't get it right from the beginning, there's no way we're going to be able to diversify leadership and board seats. It's got to start early. And so that's really kind of the thought process around College Code.
love it, love it. So tonight's topic, which I believe you brought to my attention, which I absolutely love, and again, I said it is a timely topic of now, especially with the great resignation
Yeah.
that's going on. So fresh strategies to develop and retain. Like I can stop right there. The retention piece is huge, but we're talking about developing and returning early. All right, early career pros.
Mhm.
Hence the company college code to help those folks. So talk to us. Where did that concept come from? And you kind of went into a little bit there, but what did you notice along your journey of developing the business to saying, hey, this niche that I'm seeing and
Yeah.
where the biggest gap is, and here's where I'm starting to see some strategies that can be implemented in organizations to retain uh, these early career pros.
Oh goodness, Orlando, so much here. There's so much here. I'll try to be brief.
Nope,
Um,
the floor is yours. Go ahead.
yeah, it's interesting. Again, we work at the intersection of workforce development and talent development and retention. Historically, like if you take a look at the landscape nationally, let's just focus there for this conversation. There are organizations that are doing workforce development. There are.
Mhm.
One would question how many of them are approaching it from an inclusive and equitable lens. Certainly, over the past 2 years, that's become more of a hot topic and focus for sure. But really from the get-go, thinking about building the workforce and understanding the nuances that underrepresented, underserved populations have, opportunity point. So that was one that I noticed. But then I'm a firm believer that we could focus all we want on the development and skill building and recruiting of young people, let's say Gen Z. But if we haven't thought about actually retaining them once they get into organizations and what type of environment and experience they're looking for in an employer, which we've done research on, and then the manager capability, that's a whole nother part, Orlando. How do managers of today need to manage this next generation in a way that is, it's interesting, both mindful of their experience, but also a place where we're coaching them for success because there is
Mhm.
things that they don't know. And I think there has to be a balance that a lot of times people say it's either one or the other. Either they don't know anything, we need to coach them, or we've got to do everything their way without giving them the value and insight that they need to be successful. And so our work is bridging the gap between both. We have a team that's focused on working with education institutions, your schools, your colleges, your nonprofits on supporting young people in the skill development, the career exploration, and the mentorship that's necessary to be successful. That's one side of our business. And the other side of our business is working with corporations who are saying, oh goodness, we have got to think about a thoughtful plan, especially if we're an industry or sector that does not have as much representation from a racial or gender lens. Goodness, we've got to come up with a plan to start engaging this generation. Cybersecurity, as an example, data science, as an example, tech in general, as an example. But then we also have to think about how do we build managers and leaders. This is something I'm super passionate about, to be able to work with different generations who are coming into the workforce in a thoughtful and intentional way.
Got it. Got it. I love that. So as we're seeing now, right? I don't know what the percentage is in terms of if you would. I don't know if they even like to be called millennials now.
Oh, yeah.
If that name even sticks anymore, but they're definitely dominating the workforce now, right? And holding middle management, executive level positions at a younger age
Yeah.
these days. So with that, what are some of the top strategies to retainment? Because early on it was socially conscious. They wanted to make
Mhm.
sure that the company's vision match their personal goals. Is that still the thing, or has that shifted a bit as the years progress?
Yeah, that's really really good. Let's take a step back. One thing you mentioned that I'm super passionate about, Orlando, is we need to have a conversation around the generational makeup because it's interesting. Who I am talking about as Gen Z, early career, you mentioned, and many have, as millennials. Let's just say we all need to have a refresher in the generational breakdown from boomers to Gen Z to alpha, because there's so many people who are actually calling Gen Z millennials. And it's not the same generation, and we have to be able to understand there's a distinction between what a lot of people consider millennials could be as old as 40 years old. And so we have to understand, when we say early career, let's start there, Orlando. We're talking about Gen Z born between 96 and 97, all the way to 2010. Typically, that age would be from 10 years old to 25, 26. It depends on the research study you use. I sourced Pew, but that's the age group when we're talking about early career today. So I would start by just educating us all on that
Love
piece.
it.
Okay. And so if we're talking about this generation, there's a few things I think I'm a big proponent when we're talking about effective strategies in workplaces, in organizations, of leveraging data as a tool. When I talk about leveraging data as a tool, it's twofold. It's the data we have readily accessible, the Pew Research reports, the Deloitte reports, the Black Enterprise reports, the reports that we have access to that are longitudinal studies or specific studies that tell us about people. But then there's this other piece of data that's really important, and it's qualitative data, Orlando. And I know you're a firm believer in this too, by the nature of this podcast. We need to speak with the people.
Correct.
we,
Correct.
we need to not assume we know what the next generation desire in employers, what the next generation are struggling with or need support with. We have to get proximate to them to fully understand what their experiences are. And so, a lot of what we believe is important in any type of strategy is first seeking to understand through data and through discovery, focus groups, interviews, podcasts, YouTube, whatever we need to do to understand the nuances. And so, that's where we believe it. We're talking about strategies. That's the first strategy. Education as a strategy and understanding where we are, what are some of the nuances that exist. Yeah, I'll pause there because that's a big
Okay.
one.
Yep,
Yeah.
it is. So as we're talking about the data, and I love that you brought that up, and figuring that out through surveys and all kinds of formats to gather that data, and we're talking about retainment. Retainment to me has multiple layers, right? Retainment of culture, retainment of salary, retainment of upward mobility. What you're seeing now through through your work, what else falls in that, and if those still are
Yeah.
consistent in that retainment piece for for the
Yeah.
early career pros.
Oh, good point. Retention is so loaded. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
absolutely, it's retention on the standpoint of what is keeping an early career professional at your organization. It's a lot of what you said. Certainly, it is the salary and reward, but I'll tell you, for this generation, that's actually not the most important quality they're looking for. People think it's pay and reward. That's actually not number one. It's actually growth opportunities. It is actually cross functional opportunities, growth in the terms of people also think growth is only moving up and getting promoted. That's a piece of it, but it's also exposure to different types of opportunities that help them build skill sets. This is why I said one of the best things that organizations that have the capacity to implement strategy could consider would be rotational programs.
Hmm.
Again, that's how I got into industry and function and sector. It was this opportunity in 2 years to rotate through 3 or 4 different areas of the business to learn and contribute and leave with a diverse skill set that I can then apply to a full-time position. They're hungry for that. And so that is one example of, when we're kind of talking about retention, what they're looking for. There's the other piece, you and I know, Orlando, that's around belonging in general. Do I feel I belong at this
Hmm.
organization? From the micro communication and engagement, how am I treated? If I'm in person or if I'm virtually, am I seen? Am I valued? Am I heard? Are there affinity spaces for people who look like me? Am I the only? If I'm the only, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to stay at the organization, but it does likely mean I am seeking community somewhere. And if I don't feel that there's a place for me and I'm not feeling a sense of safety, then I may not want to stay long term. If I have an organization who's knocking on my LinkedIn door, they're doing that and saying, come and work here. And it's an organization where the representation looks, a little bit more, a little broader in my identity. I might say, okay, this is a great opportunity to grow. They're paying me well. It's a city I love. And oh, there's some other people who look like me. I'm going to go there.
Exactly.
The reality of where we are.
And that's such a phenomenal point. You made two crucial points, but that one I'll start with the latter is that I don't know if, and I'll be absolute transparent and say it, I don't know if our white counterparts realize that, right? That just by skin tone, brown and black people, we come into corporate America with a certain coat of protection and armor that we have to go into, right? It's even to today, I don't care where you sit at what level, even folks in Hollywood, you hear them talk about it, it does not matter.
Oh,
So it's just a constant thing we have to battle. We don't wear it on our sleeves as much. We shouldn't, at least in my opinion, because you still have to navigate the corporate politics, and it's tricky. it's even trickier for the other. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and I want to come in on that really quickly. I so appreciate you bringing that up. And that's what, our team has been working really closely on the workforce development side, preparing the next generation for career. A lot of our conversation historically, the textbook career development has been around, this is how you put a resume together. This is how you interview. This is where you go to get a job. That is not the career development. That's not the extent to the career development that we need in 2022. We
Correct.
actually need to add on a lens that is helping particularly underrepresented populations understand what are the new rules of work and career, for one. And then two, how do I deal with what is going to happen in the workplace, which are microaggressions? If I'm encountering bias, how do I work through that? Because we think that students or young people know how to do that, and then they're hit with it. And this is literally taking people to mental health crises at work because they're like, oh my gosh, this is really taking place. I wasn't prepared for this. And so we need to add that level into our development and on our enrichment programs as well, so that they may not have all the answers, but they're prepared.
Right. That kind of touches on emotional intelligence in the workplace, which is crucial. But I don't think that's developed until you actually go through, because that's developing your business acumen, and being in the line of fire. Like, oh my God, how do I truly handle this? Mm-hmm. Even it can be of someone of your, of like skin tone, and then someone opposite you. Like, how do I handle that in different arenas? So that is so crucial, Chelsea. That is a bullet between the eyes. But the earlier point you were making, which I liked, was when you said cross-functional. A lot of people miss the piece around what I've learned in a previous career was the lateral promotion, like you said, becoming more diverse in different areas of the organization. You become more of a whole professional in add more value. So that's so crucial. So missed a lot.
And then I think there's this other piece that we have to explain for the young person who aspires CEO roles, for the young person who aspires transparently executive roles more broadly. Orlando, you and I know that becomes critical. The cross-functional experiences that you have, if you want to be a CEO, the P&L experiences, the financial understanding. And I just don't think we have enough young people, especially those from underrepresented groups, your people of color, your women, your LGBTQ plus, those groups may not fully understand that that's what's necessary to be in those roles. And so I just want to demystify all of it and provide the tools, resources, and insight so that at the end of the day, if a young professional doesn't choose to want to do their best in the workplace or, land that leadership role, that's on them. But if they want to, I want to make sure everyone has the access and opportunity to do so. And these days, not everyone does. And so that's where the work is being done.
Exactly. We need to understand business in its totality in order to progress. So I love that. So as you're coaching through folks, well, let me actually ask this question. When you're dealing with employers, what are those conversations like with educating them on here's how you start to retain? Here are 1 or 2, 3 points that I would say you can implement in your organization of what this next generation is looking for. What are those conversations like?
Yeah. Well, first I will say I feel very honored and blessed to have amazing partners. We have some great partners at College Code. So it makes the work easier because they look at us as partners. Notice I didn't say clients, they're partners. So we're learning from each other. And we are certainly advising them. But I would say, the big thing here that is really important is, again, I'm a data girl. So I'm like, knowing your data. Every leader who's here of people or HR folks who are here, we should know the generational composition of our organizations. We should certainly know the ethnic and gender and other things that we have access to and the ability to measure. But generationally, we should know where our organization lands. And industry to industry and sector to sector can look very different. So just knowing that alone is really important, because if you're an organization that is a significant baby boomer and Gen X, and you only have a small percentage, 10, 15% Gen Z and millennial, let's just throw that out there, there might be more resistance for some of these. I'm going to be honest with you, some of these fresh approaches. It's not to say a generalization, but it is to say, like, when we start to talk about millennial wave of work and Gen Z wave of work, that's different than boomer way of work. And we have to be able to call that out, because that's just the reality of where we are. And so I think that becomes important. Know your organization. And then I think the second part is when we're talking about fresh strategies, a lot of times organizations have a lot of great resources already. They just aren't marketing it and really focusing on it enough for people to know that they exist. So take an audit of what currently exists, what resources, what programs, what initiatives. And once you're able to kind of think about what exists, you want to start to really dive in and say, where is there an opportunity in these programs, these practices, these policies to add that inclusive lens, to add that equity lens, and then to consider if I'm talking about my Gen Z professional who's just graduated college, is this benefit a benefit they can use? If it's not a
Mm.
benefit that they can use, well, what else are we offering to keep them? And so that's the kind of analysis that needs to happen.
Yeah, because that's a crucial point. Because I think a lot of folks in the corporate space or at the executive level, as we're targeting new hires, it's some of the data or some of the mindset is antiquated,
That's
and we're
it.
approaching them with, hey, this whistle here, this this balloon here, and they're like, that's not what I'm looking for. That's not my generation.
Mhm.
That stuff doesn't matter. This is what I'm looking for, and by then we're far behind. We're playing catch up. Like, oh my God, we missed the ball. We have an opportunity to land some great talent, but we don't have that program. How do we develop that? So, with that, with that statement there, share. You have one or two things that you've worked with a company that you helped them switch. They were thinking one way, and you said, hey, if you transition to this, offer this because this is what the data's showing, you may see a better return,
Yeah.
in retention.
Yeah, no, that is a really, really good one. That's a really, really good one. I think there's a few things that are coming to mind around the use of data. One big one that comes up for us, a lot of organizations are we 2020 happened, the racial unrest, just
Mhm.
particularly towards the Black and Asian communities, and everyone was like, "Oh my goodness, we've got to do something." And one of the things that came up for a lot of people was forging partnerships with HBCUs. I'm a Spelman grad, so I'm
Mhm.
happy that it happened, but I'm also like, okay, let's think about this broadly, right?
Okay.
And okay, to be
Right.
honest. So I think the intention here, amazing and necessary. I think the thoughtfulness around partnership. There's hundreds of HBCUs. How did we choose the HBCU that made sense for our organization? Like choice of which HBCUs to partner with, I think is something important for organizations to consider long term. And then I think the second piece of this is, even on the concept of early talent, we don't have to just go to HBCUs. And again, I'm a graduate of one, but I would say if we're talking about even just reaching this next generation, this is where we have to look and see what's the profile of higher education institutions across the United States. Does this particular role require a 4 or 2 year degree? If it requires 2 year, please understand the amount of inequity community colleges have and the need from a socioeconomic status alone that
Mhm.
2 year colleges have. And so if we're really thinking about reaching this next generation broadly, we start to ask ourselves, well, for these roles, we could actually partner with a 2 year college. If it's 4 year, it's saying, okay, let's look at the breadthness of colleges and universities. What are some of the public schools that have significant populations of, example, Black and Hispanic Latinx students who don't typically get that love? I was in New York City, and we have the CUNYs there, and I think about some of the CUNYs that have some of them just as much representation or close representation as HBCUs. They have a lot of students of color that are overlooked. Could we consider those types of partnerships? So, Orlando, I don't know. I think you're talking specifically about on the job, but I did want to take a step back because
Mhm.
before we get them in house, we recruit them and we're trying to attract them. And I think recruiting is such a big place for many organizations. They will always say, we want to go and get them while they're young and groom them up. And I think even that decision around pipeline and partnerships, we could all be more mindful and conscious about how we choose our partners. And so a lot of our work has been really guiding partners towards making intentional decisions on their partnership, because that partnership is more than I'm going to put Norfolk State or I'm going to put Southern University on my website or Fisk on my website. It's I'm going to get to know Fisk University. I'm going to go down to Nashville. I'm going to understand the students. If we are a technology company and we're talking about coding, we're going to get our technologists on campus when it's safe, working with the students, right? I had to put that in there.
Right.
We can't do that. You will eventually, hopefully. And so being on campus, working with the students, getting to know the professors, understanding some of the nuances, that's the kind of partnerships we need to be launching, not transactional partnerships. And that requires a thoughtful approach. And so a lot of our advisory is like, that's an example of the depth that we need to go into.
And you said something really key. And again, I want to make sure that's pronounced, because the initial partnerships out of the social unrest was a transactional, right, piece there. They're like, oh my God, the backlash, what do we do? And that raises our antennas as to say, is this going to go any further? Is this just media? Is this for good PR? What is this? What's the long-term effect? It's almost just like when earlier, when all the DEI positions flooded the market during that time. So it's almost like, yeah, but what's the long-term effect? Are you going to actually hire all these people and actually make this an effective program in your organization? What's the long-term effect?
Exactly. And I think, and here's the thing, Orlando, this is why I'm very big on this partnership piece, because if done well, and employees of organizations, leaders of organizations are truly getting to know the students of particular universities, as an example, or organizations as an example, if they're truly building that partnership and that reverse kind of mentor, if you will, relationship with the students, they're recruiting, but they're also gaining insight and best practices that they later can go and incorporate into the talent strategy once the student's actually at the organization. Because they're saying, we've been on campus at Fisk for several years now. We're in the classroom. We're going to these leadership opportunities. We're getting to know the students. We had our program focused on X. The insight that we received actually is making us think, you know what, we should actually reconsider how we've been setting up this program before, because students might not have been able to take this course. For instance, if it's a particular course that you assume that all students of universities have taken before they get on the job, you go and partner with a particular college and realize, oh goodness, they didn't have this level or this degree of access to a particular course. I'm talking about technology courses, banking courses right now. Well, then in your training program that you launch at the beginning of the summer for all of your interns, you would incorporate this course or this module into your training so that there's a level playing field for everyone to be able to gain the resources and exposure that they need to be successful. But if you're not on campus and you're not asking those questions and understanding the curriculum and the professors, you'll miss that. Orlando, it happened again. Can't hear you.
What about now?
Awesome.
Oh, sorry about that.
It's okay. It's all good.
So the earlier point you made about the partnerships with HBCU, and I wanted to get your opinion on this. Do you think there was a fear from corporate America in creating those partnerships, or just a lack of awareness of the talent that's within the HBCU schools?
No, again, I think that I want to respect the fact that I think that there was some thought for it. I don't want to say that people weren't thoughtful, but I think if we're having a crisis that's impacting the Black community, and we're talking about what can, if a company or an organization or leaders like, what can we do to be a part of the solution? And there's a passion to work with the next generation or support the next generation. I can understand how they'd say, oh my goodness, colleges. And I can understand if you're sitting and you're thinking about all the colleges and you're like, Black students, next generation, by our workforce, HBCUs. And if you know that HBCUs do not always have the access that other schools have from a resource standpoint, I think it's important. And I want to just note that is so important. And as a graduate, we need that. But I do think one thing, and I say this often, is there are more than just 4 HBCUs. I went to one. So I went to one of the ones that took a lot of the dollars. Spelman, don't be mad at me. I'm just being honest. But I'm just saying, again, if we're talking about really building up a community and really reaching the people who don't always get access. There's a lot of other HBCUs that are not always getting as much support. So we can be that employer who goes against the grain and tries something different if it makes sense for our business, right?
Right.
And I think, again, there are other institutions, and I'm saying this because we did research here. There are other institutions that have a significant population of, as one example, Black students or Hispanic serving institutions. We worked with a national nonprofit, will not mention, but they are supporting the next generation of technologists. And we did a landscape analysis for them on the college and university market across the country and the graduation rates of women in computer science at different institutions. We looked at HBCUs, we looked at Hispanic serving institutions, we looked at tribal colleges, and then we looked at just universities that have a significant population of students of color. The data is just the
Got
data.
it.
Data's that's why I say when you have the data, it really helps to be intentional. It really helps you be more intentional with strategy, Orlando. And so my point is, we learned a lot of things through that data process of saying, wow, there really are actually other groups that we could be a part of providing more equity to them if we only had this data earlier. Things
I
like
like
that.
that. I like that. So to
Mhm.
that, and a follow up question. You can correct me if I'm wrong. So with that, so it could you can safely assume. I hate to assume, especially in business, is that through the lack of data from the corporations, their default was more the well-known HBCUs, because you said there are some that are not so well known that still have tremendous talent in there. So, are you saying that's probably kind of just by default? We know the FAMUs, the Spelmans, all these other colleges, but the more well-known ones that are getting major endorsements and light through media, but we don't know the smaller ones that still have tremendous talent in them, and
Mhm.
that's just due to lack of data.
I think if people had the data and leveraged the data, they'd see
Hmm.
the opportunities. But I think that yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the call to those schools is it's twofold. They're great schools. Like I'm not going to sit here and say they're great schools. A, I think B, there's probably a representation of graduates who are at the companies too. Who
Hmm.
be in leadership roles or who are employees who are saying we got to go to Hampton, we got to go to Howard, like that plays a role as well. And then I think you just have, listen, companies are they're competitors. If they hear,
Yeah.
if a finance firm hears that another finance firm is forming a $1 million partnership with name that HBC, they're like, oh, we have to figure out something to do too.
Yep.
That happens.
Which is great, right? That's a
Yeah,
phenomenal thing. It drives the
yeah,
dollars to them. Yeah.
exactly. And so my point in this is not that we need to my point in this is that I believe, especially when we're talking about early talent, I would like for organizations to take a step back, and when they're thinking about their partnerships from the undergraduate landscape, that as much as they can, if you are in cybersecurity, if you are in environmental science, go and pull the data on the current graduation rates of people who are studying cybersecurity, people who are studying environmental science, and understand the demographic disparities that exist first. Then understand amongst the breadth of colleges and universities in this nation, where's the opportunity places for your organization, and then leveraging the data that way, and then forging true partnerships with these institutions and these students where you are learning from them and they are learning from your people and your leaders, and you stay with them for a long period of time. You don't say, we're going to go try to recruit for 1 year. If we can't recruit 2 or 3 students, well, this isn't a good partnership. No, no, no. This is like dating. You may not you
Hmm.
may not kick it off well on the first shot, but maybe you're like, oh, I like this quality or this quality, and you keep at it. Like, same thing with working out, right? And so I think a lot of times, unfortunately, this is the bias. We go to a school, we partner with the club, we say these students don't have it together. I don't think this is what we thought it would be. And we want to so quickly divorce them and go to someone else because maybe they have the experience or they have the connections or they're more prepared or whatever you want to call it, more professional, whatever, instead of really doing the work to understand the background, the experiences, and truly be advocates for equity. which means that we are providing the access and opportunities that other people or groups may not have had. And that's actually how we are preparing the workforce of the future. Because if we go and look at the current, Brookings Institute has done quite a bit of research on the changing demographics across the country. Well, it's not a surprise. Demographics are changing.
Mhm.
And communities of color are starting to be more represented. And so we're actually doing a disservice if we're not doing the work to help and help engage and develop that generation starting from the younger years.
Got it. Got it. Let me ask you this. How detailed do you get with organizations? Meaning, from do you discuss different programs? So, say if it was, this is Orlando LLC, and I'm pitching an HBCU for a partnership. Yes, I have the benefits, the upward mobility, things like that. But are there specific programs that you're saying, hey, again, if you add this, this is the population they're looking for this, not so much on the benefit side, they're looking for X, they're looking for Y.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Great question. So let me ask you, you're asking me, what is this next generation looking for as we're talking to employers? Is some of the things. I love the question. Cool.
correct.
Done quite a bit of research. What are Gen Z interested in? And it's interesting. If you look at Ripple Match is a fantastic organization that has done a study on what Gen Z want in employers. They did a study, like a longitudinal study that was Gen Z wide across racial ethnic groups. And then they did one that was focused on underrepresented minorities. That was really drilling in there, which was profound. And maybe, Tia, we can share that in the chat. I'll figure out a way to get it to folks. But if you look at it, you have the key pieces that often come up for Gen Z. Job stability, growth and advancement, social impact, compensation, company prestige. Like, is this like a cool company I want to work for? Those are some of the main ones that come up.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, when you hone in training and development, that's another one. When you hone in on underrepresented minorities, there was a slightly higher desire around job stability, compensation, and social impact.
Mm. Got it. Wow.
But again, it makes sense.
It does.
It makes sense if the job stability makes sense, especially we don't want to make generalizations, but if you've noticed instability of employment or opportunities for family members or for friends or even yourself, if it's been hard to get a job, you want to be at a place where you're going to be able to count on, right? Compensation, you want to make sure that you're being paid. If we go back and look at the current student loan crises, Black students and Hispanic students are most negatively impacted.
Right.
Again, makes total sense. If we talk about social impact, again, that was important across the board, but there was a higher percentage for underrepresented minorities. And, again, I think that comes down to a lot of this next generation. Orlando, we've talked about it. When they're interviewing, they're asking the hiring manager questions about diversity. And it's like, woe to you, hiring manager, if you're not prepared.
Right. That's a whole other conversation. That's a
whole other podcast.
That's a webinar.
Yeah, so that's a few. That's a few. I hope that's helpful.
It is, and I have a follow up to that as well. Is there data around that same study that you looked at from, you said Ripple Match, that talks about, is it any of the industry specific heavy? Is it tech, fintech, healthcare?
In terms of the purpose, no, it was a broad study. Although you can imagine, I don't want to. I'm gonna be careful. That was their study, but Chelsea would add on. When you talk, it's interesting when you talk with this next generation today, and this is another thing that I think organizations would. I hope that this is empowering for them. There was a time when there were the hot industries. I remember when I was at Spelman, it was cool to say you were going to work on Wall Street. I'm not saying it's not Wall Street, people. I'm not saying it's not anymore. I'm just saying.
Disclaimer: no backlash for Chelsea.
No backlash. Chelsea loved her Wall Street years, but truly, it's not necessarily that's the only sector that people want to work on if you go to a college these days. Tech, CPG, startup, creative spaces, social enterprise. It really is a mixed bag. I think that there's a lot of organizations. There's some very niche industries. Again, I was speaking yesterday with this fantastic leader in cybersecurity in Florida. She's a leader of an organization. She was telling me about that space and how it's truly like one of those um, growing fields and so critical for this country. And I was thinking to myself, wouldn't it be cool if she could, if her and her organization could start to do the exploration to cybersecurity with high school students and then getting
Mm.
in front of the freshmen, because it isn't something that comes up from students, but I think it's simply because they don't understand necessarily what the role entails. If they understood what the role entails and the importance and critical nature of the role, I think you'd have a lot more students like, I want to do that. And so I think that a lot of times some of these niche industries are like, I don't think anybody's ever going to want to do this. And they're very lucrative, stable, great opportunities. And they kind of get in their heads and say, well, everyone wants to do tech. How could we ever compete with the Google? How could we ever compete with the Facebook? How could we ever compete with the Microsoft? And I think that the opportunity is you can start to do the true exploration and skill development and mentoring early and start changing the outlook and vision for some of these young people. And I think that's the work that has to be done because, last point, the whole interest and drive for technology. We were doing some research the other day around Gen Z and technology, and everybody says these tech obsessed Gen Zers, they grew up with that as their form of learning and
Exactly.
in engagement. Like, why are we beating them up? Like, that is what they grew up with. And so, of course, it's going to sound cool to go and work at a Google or a Facebook or an Instagram or a TikTok or Snapchat.
Exactly, exactly. And while we're at it, it's like they're helping us, right? They're the folks that are a little bit older in generation. They're helping you, even from the basics of your iPhone.
Yeah,
I have noticed that I'm like, I don't know how to work this thing all the way.
that's what
They're like, here you go, Dad, and I'm like, it's ridiculous because they just grew up in that space.
yeah.
So here's a question more for more close to home when it comes to your partners, not clients, but your partners at College Code. Is that what does that look like in terms of industry? Is it heavy
Mm,
one way or is it a good eclectic mix
mhm.
of partners that you work with?
Oh goodness, it's such a good question that comes up. It really is an eclectic mix, which we love. Which we
Good.
love. We had a strategy session with the team and our finance director last week where we were looking at 2020. We were looking at 2021, and the breadth of our reach. And last year, about 50% of our work was in the consulting space as advisors and partners, really helping come up with strategies or reevaluate strategies for organizations.
Mm.
30% was workforce development. We have a product that we are that are currently in schools and nonprofits are leveraging that's called Jumpstart to Career that is providing culturally competent and conscious career development for the next generation. That is growing. We're actually going to be turning that into a tech-enabled platform this year. And then finally, about 20% of our work is corporate training. Orlando, I mentioned to you, we can have the strategy, but if we don't have the leaders and the managers equipped to take the strategy on a day to day basis and create that space of belonging and engagement for anyone on their team, none of the strategy works. And
Yeah.
so the enablement and the development and the coaching of leaders is another very important piece of the pie that we're not discussing. And so I just wanted to kind of tell you, for us, we are less industry and more kind of functionality of what we offer. Yeah, so we've got CPG companies that we work with. We do quite a bit of work with agencies, PR agencies.
Mm.
We work, yeah, which has been a huge,
Wow.
huge space for us, and a lot of interesting, great work being done there. Fashion, we've worked with fashion companies, we've worked with finance firms. It's been a mix.
Wow. PR firms. That's interesting
Yeah.
because you're representing the company that represents. In essence. So that's good. I like that. So
Yeah.
final question. I want to be mindful of your time. You said it a few times here, and I wanted you to unpack it a little bit more. Cultural competency. What
Mhm,
does that mean? I
mhm.
love that. I love that term.
First of all, it's one of the 2022 buzzwords, I think, for anybody who is managing, leading people, anyone in HR. Everything that we do, we want to be mindful of doing it through a cultural competent lens. What does that mean? That means that I have an understanding. I may not be an expert, but I have an intent to understand, get proximate, and to an extent center the experiences of people from various cultures. Certainly here in the United States, we talk about race. It could be ethnicity as well. It could be international colleagues as well. But the point here is we are taking into account different cultures as we communicate with our colleagues, as we provide feedback to our colleagues, as we think about general engagement with our colleagues. And so, if we are not engaging, if we're a leader and we're not engaging through a cultural competent lens, we're missing the opportunity to build trust. We're missing the opportunity to be empathetic leaders. And so some people might be saying, Chelsea, how do I become culturally competent? That's a good question. And I would say there's a lot of opportunities here. One is educate, 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 educate. Right now, there's not a shortage of podcasts, books, YouTube series, Netflix specials that you can dive into to be able to expand your awareness. LinkedIn Learnings is a really great place to start as well. There's some great content out there, actually. Two, get proximate. Start to have those conversations with your colleagues who are different from you. Lean in. Don't run away from the opportunity to have the conversation because you are not building the capacity and the muscle there. Lean into it, because that's actually going to help you be the emotionally intelligent leader, Orlando, that you mentioned. Those are a few things. And then the third is don't be afraid to remix it. Our friend Lindsay Pollock talks
Yep.
about remix. I had to shout her out because she's my favorite. But Lindsay talks about remixing, doing something a little bit different, taking the good of what's working and taking new best practices and insights and seeing how that works. It is the time for us to reimagine, remix, and reconsider. So let's do it. And if it doesn't work, we can try it again. But those are some ways that we build cultural competence.
Love it, love it. It sounds like a unique arm of the diversity umbrella, but it drills down even more, and that's something that needs to be taught early on too. That's like you talked about earlier,
Yeah.
in dealing with the politics of corporate America. So that's huge. There will be a part two, folks. I'm just throwing it out there and holding Chelsea to it. There's so much we can unpack, but I absolutely want to be mindful of your time. So please share with folks where they can find you, anything, any events that you have coming up. How can they get more of your data and your core competence skills?
Yes, yes. Well, folks, first of all, I am absolutely delighted. Orlando, thank you for the gift of being able to engage and partner with you. Connect on LinkedIn. Tia has shared our college code link. Tia, if you can also share my personal LinkedIn if we haven't already, please connect with me on LinkedIn. We are going to be launching this year. Like I mentioned, we are starting our prospect calls and nailing down partners for 2022. So if you're interested, reach out. We'd love to explore working together. We are going to be rebranding. So this is an interesting thing to share. College Code will not be our name in a
Oh
few
no.
months. I know it'll still be connected, but we are expanding the breadth of our work. We've been doing that over the last 2 years, and our name, in some ways, has kind of pigeoned us. And we want to be able to have people find us who really are committed to workforce and talent development. So be on the lookout. What you can do to stay in touch with us is I put together an early talent toolkit to support anyone who's tuned in today. So if you are interested, you can text College Code Speaks, College Code Speaks, one word, S plural speaks, and you can text 33777. And that's a great way for you to get on our email list, and we'll follow up with a resource that'll help you really think about engaging Gen Z in a really thoughtful way. So again, text College Code Speaks to 33777 to get on our news serve. Folks, thank you so much.
Love it. I have college daughters now. They will be getting this immediately. Absolutely love it. I'm gonna take a stab at a name. Let me not, because we'll just wait for the rollout. We'll just wait for the rollout.
Just wait. Just be patient. It's coming.
Okay.
You are on our MVP list, Orlando.
Thank you.
First to know.
Awesome. Chelsea, thank you so much to you and your amazing team as putting this together, for your wealth of knowledge, being on the front lines, your commitment, your expertise. Absolutely enjoyed this conversation. And as I mentioned, there will be a part 2. So Tia and team, please get ready. We'll be connecting later this year again,
Yay.
to bring this.
Orlando, can I
Yes.
just correct Tia? Tia, it is College Code Speaks one word, and it's texting 32777. I just want to make sure folks get the right
32 or 33?
33777. College Code Speaks one word.
Awesome. I'm gonna close this out with a quick video and chat after in the back scene. But thank you so much again, Chelsea.
Thank you.
And we will have you back. Stay tuned. Hold
Thank
on.
you. Tia, thank you as well. Okay.